Dr. Guillotine here with Curt Vendel at the Vintage Computer Festival East, and we're here for the Atari 40th anniversary. Go ahead, Curt, take it away.
Yes, it's the 40th anniversary of the release of the Atari 400 and 800 computer system. So today here at VCS, well actually this whole weekend at VCS, we've set up a display as one part of an entire timeline of all the Atari computers across all the years. So one of the more popular parts of the display that's been shown at the VCF, this year is the Atari Dealer Demonstrator. These were put out at various Atari stores to basically sell product, instruct the potential buyers on what type of features there are, and also to do live demonstrations of the software and the hardware. This one's kind of unique because it contains what's called the ERIC. The ERIC is what's called the Electronic Retail Information Center. There's a big black box down there, and inside of that contains an actual Laserdisc controller that's connected through what's called an 850 interface directly into the 800. So this 800, like for example, it's asking me to press start. When I press start, it's actually going to access the Laserdisc player, and it's going to go through an entire marketing demo that's interactive. The users are going to be able to press various keys and learn about all the features of the Atari home computers. So this is a really, really nice, unique, display that the I keep calling it VCS, VCF show attendees have actually been able to see.
It's amazing looking. Look at this thing. It's beautiful. And these were like across the retail stores, you said, right? Like Toys R Us or...
Well, no, it's more like Sears, JCPenney's, those kind of retailers. Those were more of the prominent retailers for Atari at the time.
So this is a pretty rare thing to have. I mean, who saved these things? Huh?
Fortunately, I got this from a computer store on Staten Island. They were going to throw it out. I used to live on Staten Island. I was able to salvage it. So
amazing.
A lot of the things I have been salvaged from the garbage. Unfortunately, didn't wind up in the landfill.
Right.
So let's kind of walk through the beginnings of how the Atari 800 or the Atari computer line was created. What I'd like to do is I'd like to turn this over to my friend Klaus, and he's going to talk about something really special here. This is a pre-production prototype of the first Atari 800s that were sent out to developers.
Take it away, Klaus.
Hi, I'm Klaus Buchholz. I used to work for Program Design Incorporated. They were one of the launch software developers for Atari. And Atari provided them with this pre-production unit. Notice the different styling, and there's some internal differences too, as far as the memory map goes. Here's a page from Joe DeCure's notebook, which shows how the original memory map was laid out.
And Joe is here, right?
Joe, yeah, was a keynote speaker today, so he was pretty amazed to see this machine.
Tell us a little more about it.
It's another unusual aspect is it only had 36K of RAM. Atari originally only intended to use 4K and 16K boards. And it's been modified though to work as a production unit so that the software developers could...
What year did this launch?
The product launch was 1979. This one came from 1978, so the developers had some advance warning. The Program Design Incorporated in Greenwich, Connecticut, they wrote some of these first launch programs like Invitation to Programming, States and Capitals. They specialize in education software.
Excellent. And then from this computer we move on to this.
Well, this is a rather unique computer, and immediately anyone who's familiar with an Atari 800 is going to notice something very, very peculiar about it. It actually has a left side access panel on it, and this panel, this is called an 800D. This is a developer system, and what it is this actually has an entire board in the left side of this computer system connected to a modified CPU board in the rear of the system. It provides an actual external, I guess you could kind of call it a primordial PBI, parallel bus interface. It's actually a direct bus connector that goes right onto the Atari's main primary bus. Also in here are 2 serial ports that are also connected directly to the bus. The board's got its own ROMs in it. There's 2 ROMs. One has what's called Bug, which is a debugger program that the developers used. The second is a device handler that loads up the R driver, the RS-232 driver, in a very similar way that the 850 would load it off of a disk drive. So it's a shame that somebody from engineering didn't bring this up to marketing and said, guys, why don't we sell the 800s like this? We could maybe call it an 800 Plus, just like Apple had a Apple Plus. Why not have an 800 Plus? And they could have sold a more upgraded, upscale version of the 800.
Seems like a common theme amongst the companies that are out was marketing messed up.
Well, I think in this particular instance, it's more of the engineering messed up because nobody bothered to grab this and say, hey, let's go take this up to marketing and get marketing to sell it.
Right.
So that's a possibility. Another kind of interesting oddball, some of the very first Atari 850 interfaces were shipped in black anodized casing. There was such a concern that the interface module was going to produce so much RF interference, they wrapped it completely in aluminum.
Whoa.
So there are very few of these were released like that, and then came out in a more common plastic shell. There's some other little oddities here. I like to call this the little sister to Colleen. Colleen is the code name of the Atari 800. This is actually Colette. Colette was a single main board motherboard for the 800. So the CPU card, the OS card, and the three memory cards are all wrapped up in one, right directly onto this board. And this was submitted in 1982 at the exact same time as the Atari 1200 XL. It's possible that Atari was considering putting out a new low-cost 800 as a parallel product to the 1200. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get much more information on this yet. Who knows? Maybe somebody who's watching this video will know something about it.
Put some comments down below and give us a contact us about it.
Please. And then what you have here is this display has every product that Atari developed for the 400, 800 line. So going across kind of put things together in groups specifically because of the association. The 825 required the 850 interface. It's a Centronics connecting parallel printer, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to do this with the camera, but in order for Atari to get a lot of good products out quickly, they actually licensed a lot of existing products from companies. So this is not only a Centronics compatible printer. If you can possibly see here, it actually says 737 logic. This is actually an actual Centronics 737 printer. Atari just rebadged it as their own. So
I'll come back and take shots of that.
Sure. So the same thing with the modem. The modem is actually, I don't recall the name of the manufacturer, but this is.
Oh, that's the one you actually put the phone on there.
This is actually the one you would take you would dial a telephone number on your telephone. You would listen for the tones from the computer. Once you heard it, you would take this, you'd push it down into these little suction cups here to hold the phone in, and then you would flick a switch back here, and then you would be connected onto CompuServe, The Source, Dow Jones Industrial,
that is wild.
Or a bulletin board, or maybe you called your friend's computer, maybe you want to transfer some files back and forth between your friend's computer. This is all
the internet.
This is all pre-internet. This is all pre-ARPANET. This is real old school communications.
So there was bulletin board systems, right, that you'd be able to dial into?
Absolutely. In fact, Atari had its own bulletin. Well, not Atari himself, but Atari enthusiasts created their own bulletin board. The most famous was called Amos, which was the Atari Message Information System. Another really famous bulletin board was called Forum. That came out. And then there were others that came out, but they were a very large network of bulletin boards, and in fact Atari itself ran 4 telephone lines. They actually had an official Atari bulletin board system they were running on 4
Do you happen to remember the number?
Don't remember the number, unfortunately. I know it was like, 408-745 with 2000 used to be Atari's main number. I don't know.
Well,
what
look,
the
you do know some number. That's amazing that you know that number.
I don't know what I had for lunch yesterday, but I could tell you stuff like that.
That's amazing.
So let me just put this back over here for a sec.
Let's continue down the line.
So then you've got things like the 820 printer, the 810 disk drive. This is something that very few people have gotten an opportunity to see. This is the 815 dual density dual disk drive. Unfortunately, because Atari really didn't want to get into the business side of computing, it was canceled, and also this really high-end accounting package, which actually only works with the 815, is also canceled. In fact, you see.
How did you get your hands on this thing?
I can tell you, but then I'd have to kill all your audience.
Oh no, let's not do that.
But other things like accessories, Atari made sure they made every type of possible accessory for their computer. So, like the 800, you've got a normal keyboard, but for a business person or accounting person, a numeric keypad is an absolute must. So Atari actually created the CX85. This would plug into any of the joysticks, and with certain programs like the Bookkeeper, you could use the keypad here, and it worked exactly the same as if it was a keyboard. In other words, it's almost as if this keyboard kept extending out. So they provided something good and unique like that, and they actually gave you the source code if you wanted to write your own drivers to support it. Another kind of unique.
Look at that thing. That thing looks way ahead of its time.
Yeah, well, this was a very well-designed light pen, and light pens at the time in the late 70s and the early 80s were really thought to be what the mouse is today. I mean, everyone uses a mouse or they use a touchpad. At the time, it was really thought that we would start using light pens, and when you needed to select something on the screen, instead of bringing a cursor up and double clicking on an icon, you could bring your light pen up and touch something on the screen, and then you would go to the next screen or you'd bring up information. Sadly, Atari created a cassette with some demo programs for this, but they never actually did any. It's very rare. Not too many people have ever seen it, but it's a very beautiful piece of hardware. As far as other accessories, as far as the 800 was concerned, it was meant to be a very expandable, user-friendly system. You could buy 8K modules, you could buy 16K from Atari itself, and of course from third parties, they sold things like 32K, 64K, RAM discs. You had other companies doing 80-column cards. There was a company out of California that actually did a parallel serial card. There were a lot of things that were done that really took the 800 and elevated it really into a powerful set of features.
So we have this amazing accounting package that only works on this particular floppy drive, keypad. We have light pens. What else we got?
Before Atari Writer came out, the original Atari word processor, and again, you look at the quality of this.
This packaging looks amazing.
The packaging itself is really beautiful,
especially for the 70s and 80s.
And
whoa, look at that.
You look at how they really went out of the way, and as you can see, I mean, this is still sealed. But even this, look, they even had a cassette tutorial to teach you how to use it. I mean, Atari really went out of its way to really produce a very professional quality product. And then, later on they came out with something. This was a difficult program for some people to use. So the answer was Atari Writer, which was really a very quick and very easily learned program, and it really changed the way people used computers, the Atari computers specifically, because you could literally just take the cartridge, plug it in, instantly understand how to use it, and you began typing reports, you could edit text files, you could do all sorts of great things with it. So this is another printer, and this is also another printer that Atari purchased from an existing printer company. There was a company named Trencom. Trencom had two different printers, the Trencom 100, which was a 40-column printer, which is this exact same printer. The only difference is Trencom for Atari modified the back of theirs to have the SIO ports and the power. So this is actually a Trencom 100, but it's been specifically re-engineered to work as an SIO device to work on the Atari computers. If you do a little looking online, you'll see another one that looks very similar to this. It's twice as wide. It's an 80-column printer. It'll say Apple Silent Type on it. Apple also did the same thing. They worked a deal out with Trendcom, and they rebadged their own version of it for the Apple II computers. And then, of course, Atari, again, supporting their products, they had their own line of thermal paper. So if you wanted paper for the printer, you had it. And I think it was good for them that they actually gave the measurements. And if you didn't want to buy the Atari thermal paper, or maybe you didn't have a dealer that had it in stock, you could buy just generic paper on your own. It would, the thermal paper would work as well. We'll kind of just take one quick step back over here. Again, speaking about Atari supporting its products, you needed discs for your disk drive. Atari sold their own discs. You could buy those too. So, Atari made sure if any product it sold, it had all the supplies for it.
Branding is all over the place.
We even skipped over on the 825. They sold the ribbon for the 825 printer. So, Atari really, you have to give them credit. They made sure that when you bought a product, they made sure everything for that product, they gave you all of the accessories, all the abilities to be able to take care of it. They didn't expect you to have to go.
It looks really well designed, graphically, the style of it fits the 70s, and it looks modern for the 70s.
Well, yeah, it does have a 70s look to it, but you see, here's the thing. These real, the whole kind of sale of the Ataris was computers truly made for the home.
No, but they look modern for 70s, because I remember they had the wood grain Soul 20s.
Sure.
And
well, it's a very high-tech look to it. But here's the thing. Atari looked at the Apple II. It looked at the old M size. It looked at the existing hobbyist computers. And for a hobbyist computer, you can't sell that to the general public. How do you sell that to the stay-at-home mom? How do you sell that to the businessman? How do you sell that to the grandma? Because they're not going to want to open a metal box, be exposed to a high voltage power supply, and then look at this board with all these chips on it and risk static shock, risk getting electrocuted. So here, what does Atari do? They create a computer system where everything is nice, clean, simple modules. They come out, they come in. But look inside the computer itself. We'll take these guys out here, give you a little full tour of the inside of the computer. But if you look inside, everything has been covered over. You don't see the electronics. All you have access to are the slots. And even the slots, everything is keyed. These modules can only go in one way. If I decide to try and turn around, put it this way, you can't put it in. It's been designed. It's
idiot-proof.
It's idiot-proof. It's a horrible thing to say.
But that's the word.
But unfortunately, yes. You have idiots, but you also have people who would intentionally, just for the heck of it, let's see what happens when we put it in upside down or backwards. Go back over to the 850 real quick. Now, every other computer on the market, their serial buses, and someone who's technically inclined would know this, most serial ports had male connectors on them. Atari decided on its serial port connectors, they're going to be female. Now, why would Atari create an industry standard RS-232 port but use a non-standard plug on it? I'm going to show you why. I'm going to take a joystick, and if this was a standard serial port with standard male connectors on it, how much you want to bet somebody would have taken a joystick, tried to plug it in the back of this, and they would have shorted the interface out.
100%.
So Atari used their heads, they reversed the ports on this. It was an inconvenience because now you had to buy a custom cable, but you made sure that somebody didn't decide to plug a joystick into it and short this out. Here again a little bit. And the idiot proof goes even to here. Now today we use lightning bolt. We use all sorts of really tiny connectors.
Yeah.
We are now accustomed to technology. We're not afraid of technology, and we're not ignorant to technology, which means most people, from the working mother to the father, the stay-at-home dad, to the grandma, to the grandfather, they could pretty much use those tiny little cables, plug them in, they can work with it. At the time, early on in the the late 70s, early 80s, people were very fearful of computers. These were new things. People were very hesitant. They were afraid they were going to blow something up or they were going to electrocute themselves. So, Atari made this big, huge, trapezoid, user-friendly plug, and again, it's keyed. The plugs can only go in one way. It was impossible to try and force a plug in backwards. So, they made everything so that it would be safe. It would be easy for people to use, and they kept it so that people wouldn't be scared of using the computer. So when Atari used the slogan, "It was truly made for the home," they really did engineer something that was made for the masses. They made it user-friendly. They made it user-safe, and they made it user goof-proof.
Yeah, they seem very successful at it. I mean, not just in terms of the user interface and the experience, but it seems like they sold quite a few of these machines.
They sold well. They didn't, unfortunately, Commodore really, they underpriced them. But if you look at the Commodore, look at the quality of an 800 compared to a Commodore 64. Now they both, functional-wise, they both can accomplish.
No, but those Commodore cases break so easy.
Well, the Commodore cases are very cheap. Simple cases.
The power supplies are filled with epoxy.
It was a very smart, cheap design. It accomplished the effect of, let's put out a computer that if we had done it at an Atari level, it would have cost $800. Let's do it at a level where it's going to be, what was it, $499, I think, or something like that.
I think it was $499 when it came out.
That's because you look at the design of it, where it was necessary. The corners were cut, and you had a. See, it's idiot-proof. See, even I can't do it because I'm a complete idiot. All right, there we go. But Atari didn't sell as well as, say, the Commodore, and that wasn't because of the quality. It was because they were undercutting the market.
What else we got here?
And that's all well and good. So we'll kind of move over. This is Colleen's little sister. This is Candy.
So what came first? Was it the 800 or the 400?
The project itself was called Colleen.
Okay.
So originally, the whole entire idea of upgrading the 2600 to be a more capable video game system was originally codenamed Project Colleen. Now, Colleen actually started out more in a feature set of what the 400 was, and then as it evolved, Colleen became the lead system, and then the lower end system was codenamed Candy. So really, at the last minute, a decision was made, from what I've been able to surmise, from the last documents I was able to find, November 1978, the final decision is made, because there was a debate going back and forth. Do we put out the 400 with no keyboard on this? So basically, kind of picture this exact system, but this is just smooth plastic going all the way down. Okay, no SIO port. Basically, what would you have right there? You'd have just a game player, and that's actually what's written in the notes, game player. The idea was they would sell a keyboard, but it would plug into the 2 joystick ports, and it would be an external keyboard. It would be an aftermarket item. So it would have the capability of playing a game like Star Raiders, but you would buy the keyboard separately on its own. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, they decided to include the keyboard, they decided to include the SIO port. I feel that it was a bad decision. The whole point of the project originally was to make the next upgrade to the 2600 was, the 2600 was only supposed to last 3 years, maybe 4. So by 79, by 80, we should have seen the replacement to the 2600. The 2600 should have taken the back burner. The new console should have had all the new software first. Maybe we released the software on the 2600 maybe 6 months later.
So they were trying to do too much at once, basically.
No, Atari decided they wanted a full-blown computer division, but instead of doing just one computer, they decided to call this the Basic Computer. Okay? And it's actually trademarked. It was actually called the Basic Computer. In fact, actually, take a quick walk over here. This is the product packaging for the 400.
Oh, yes, it's
and you'll
basic
notice
computer.
the basic computer.
Right.
That was the terminology. That was how this was sold. The 800 was meant to be the full-blown computer. This was meant to be the basic computer. So they changed a game player, which was meant to replace the 2600. They turned it into a basic computer, and they continued on with the 2600. That product should have, you know, basically seen its day. It was time to start, you know, winding down on it, and they very easily could have done that and let the market basically do it. They could have only released the hot new titles on the 400 first, 6 months later released ports on the 2600. So basically what would happen is the consumer, the market would have all gravitated over to the 400 because better graphics, hottest new games, and they're on it first. So people would have moved away from the 2600, they would have automatically moved over to the 400, and then they could have gracefully and easily gotten rid of the 2600. The 400 could have been the new system. Can you imagine a system, a game system of the 400's capability, not in 82, which was the 5200, but imagine it in 1979.
Wow.
Imagine this comes out at the same time and television came out.
It would have killed it.
And television probably would have been canceled 6 months later because it could never come anywhere near the 400.
I couldn't believe some of the ports that I saw of the games, of the arcade games on this system. Like Pac-Man, for instance. I just
Well,
thought,
imagine if
amazing.
Pac-Man came out first on the 400 and not on the 2600. The 400 version, while it's landscape, it's wide, it's still a very good port. It's almost arcade perfect. It still need a little work, but it's leaps and you know, it's shoulders above the 2600 version. So imagine that coming out first. Imagine holding off on Space Invaders.
Right.
Instead of Space Invaders coming out in 78, imagine Space Invaders coming out in 79 and being the pack-in, being the game that comes included with the 400. And I mean, that Space Invaders was really good. Even though it was a lot different from the arcade, it was still a great Space Invaders. Now, the keyboard. We talked about the keyboard, and we mentioned that it would be a separate item. And the whole thing was, the final decision in November was, we're going to include the keyboard because Star Raiders is such a great game. Well, that's fine. Why not sell the keyboard, and with the keyboard you include Star Raiders as a pack-in, and of course you sell keyboard Star Raiders separately so that it can be used on the 800.
Because hindsight is always 20/20.
Well, it is 20/20, but this is some common sense things. You know, even an NBA back in the 80s or the late 70s should have been able to think of these things. Because think about it, you sell the computer, now you're selling an aftermarket, you're going to make more money, and you're going to sell a game, and now you're giving it the keyboard, but you're still keeping it a game player. Because remember, you still omit the SIO port. You don't have a peripheral port on this. This is really only meant to play advanced games. It's never going to be meant to play. Never going to be meant to use disk drives or printers or anything like that. So this, in my mind, they made a very bad decision, but it is what it is. You know, there's nothing you can do about it unless you can find me a time machine.
This, would you say?
If anybody out there is secretly holding a time machine in their garage, please let me use it just for one day.
We'll call Doctor Who.
Please call Doctor Who or Dr. Brown, whoever's got it. So another one is the 835. This is the unlike the acoustic coupler modem, this was called a direct connect modem. And the reason for that is your phone line directly connected into it, and then you can come out of it and plug in your own regular phone
and use it as a phone or use it as a modem.
You can manually dial it, but the neat thing about the program on here is you could dial a telephone number directly through the program, which was called Telelink 2, and you just dial right through the modem. You never had to pick up a phone, which was a really nice, convenient feature. This was still an Atari product, but this was an Atari product that was jointly done with Rackle-Vatic. And of course, anybody who knows computers knows Rackle-Vatic. They were the king next to Hayes when it came to
I know
any
Hayes,
kind of
but
modem.
I didn't know the what was the
Rackle-Vatic.
Okay.
But they were a very, very big modem manufacturer. So Atari went to Rackle-Vatic because, again, why have to reinvent the wheel, have to do all this research.
Partner with
on
somebody that's
developing.
already got the tech.
Just go to a company and work out a joint agreement, have them develop the product for you, and they deliver to you, and you put it into your own case. It's very simple. And wrapping up things, you've got the 410 cassette recorders. This was the original one. This was the one that came out in 1979. Had a nice little convenient handle. This one is even more unique only because not only was this the first version that was only out for 1 year, but this is actually what's called the 410p. And the 410p, I actually think it says it on the back here. Yes, it actually says on the model number, the 410p. Not only is this a limited version of it, but the reason why is it used an external 6-volt power supply, which was, all the other ones had the power supply built into the back. So for a short period, they actually used an external wall wart, and you powered the cassette with it. Of course, marketing realized that's too much trouble. Let's put everything into one. So after 1979, they built a more robust version. This was done in Japan. These were done out of Hong Kong. This is technically, even though it says the 410, this is actually the 410A. This is the more widely used and more well-known version of the 410. And this was produced from 1980 through about the mid of 1983, and then it was replaced by the 1010 tape cassette recorder. And again, Atari again supporting its products. One very important thing, while Atari decided not to make this a dedicated game player, what it did do was it actually went to a specialist in education, but a specialist, her name was Lisa Loop. They brought her on as a full-time consultant, and she actually worked with Atari to develop getting educational programs onto the computers. So what's very telling about that is you notice the very first cartridge, the very first model number of a cartridge for any of the computer systems is the CXL 4001. Okay, this was the very first cartridge, and it's the educational system cartridge. When you plug this into the computer, this would manage the cassette recorders.
Okay.
So with this went together with various educational programs like world history, physics, automotive repair, electrical design, electrical engineering. There were all of these educational programs that Atari put out. They put out quite a few of these. And what's neat is, it doesn't say it here, but it shows it on here, is this was part of what was called the Talk and Teach series. And the reason for that is the 410 cassette recorders had a very, very unique feature. Unlike a regular cassette deck, which most other computers used, the 410s had 2 audio tracks on them. One was used for loading data into the computer for the programs. The other one actually did an audio track. So it would talk to you. So for games like, for programs like conversational Italian, you could learn Italian. You could learn,
from a program and hear the audio.
You would hear the audio. So the program would come up, it would show the word on the screen, it would pronounce the word on the screen, you could pronounce it, and if you needed to repeat, you would hit the repeat, and the cassette recorder would be controlled by the computer. It could rewind, go back, repeat the audio for you. It would move forward to the next chapter. And while it's talking to you or playing music, it's loading up the next section of the program into memory from the data track. So this was a really, really powerful feature for this actually was a very powerful peripheral, which a lot of people weren't aware of, but it really was very unique to Atari. Then just kind of rounding it out, I keep mentioning how Atari supported its computer line with every conceivable accessory. The same thing happened with its own brand of cabling. It tried to address as much as possible at the time. So you had black and white monitor cables, there were color monitor cables, terminal cables, modem, the printer cable. You were talking before about the
You literally
Atari,
have everything. Oh man.
You were talking about the Atari 825. This is that unique Centronics connector. It's not like a regular Centronics connector that we're used to, that funky, Amphenol connector. And then of course it has the DB15 to go to the 850. So Atari really tried to provide everything that was necessary so that anyone who bought any of their computer products could get anything they needed to support it. So this is only a small part, believe it or not, this is only a small part of what's called the Atari Museum. I run a website on the internet at atarimuseum.com, and I try to provide as much information, photos, there's downloads of diskette images, source code, documents, various programs, any kind of information. If I don't have something, there's a contact form on there. Please feel free to contact me. If by chance there's an Atari employee that's watching this, I would love to hear from you. If you've got some information, stories, or anything you want to help contribute or share to the site.
Old school notes is really cool. Old contracts, right? Like all these
anything.
things.
I mean, engineering logbooks. Here's the original, a photocopy of the actual notes written as I mentioned Lisa Loop. There's her name right there. That's funny. But these are the actual notes that were written as the 800 was being developed. Here's a meeting where they write up information about what happened in the meeting. I have things like, let's see here. I've got FCC, the actual FCC documents that were submitted to the Federal Communication Commission to get these certified so that they could be sold. There's other documents, schematics. I try to get everything possible, anything to do with Atari, salvage it, put it up on the website, present it so that people can see it, reference it, use it. So trying to, I'm not the one-stop end-all. There's plenty of other sites out there, but I try to do my best in
I gotta say, you're very knowledgeable
corner of the internet to provide as much information as possible about Atari.
Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hearing more from you. And like we keep saying, we're hopefully going to hear some feedback from people in the industry, and we'll keep this conversation going.
Sounds good. Take care. It's not a big deal, but from this difference, huh?